The chair legs scraped louder than they should have. That's what I remember first, not his voice, not the words, but the sound of wood against tile sharp enough to make people look up. My glass was still in my hand when I said it. Then she can start paying your rent. The room didn't just go quiet, it folded in on itself. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. My sister's smile stayed exactly where it was, but her eyes flickered quick, calculating, like she was trying to decide whether this was a joke she could laugh at or a line she shouldn't cross. Rent, my mother said, her voice too light, too careful. What rent? My father blinked once, slow, like a man adjusting to light he hadn't asked for. Dinner had been going the way it always did, predictable in its imbalance. The table was set with the good plates, the ones my mother saved for Sundays, and guests, though tonight we were neither. Roast chicken sat in the center skin, crisp, the smell of rosemary and butter doing its best to soften what we all knew was coming. My sister Claire had arrived 10 minutes late and 10 degrees warmer than the room required. She always did. She carried her presence like it was something she'd earned, not something handed to her at birth. My father stood when she walked in. He didn't do that for anyone else. "There she is," he said, smiling in a way I'd spent most of my life trying to earn and had long since stopped expecting. My star. Claire kissed his cheek, light practiced. "Hi, Dad." I nodded at her. "Hey." She smiled at me, kind enough to be seen as kind, distant enough to stay safe. "Traffic was a mess," she said, sliding into her seat. "But I made it." "You always do," my father replied. I took a sip of water. It tasted like metal. Or maybe that was just the evening settling into its usual shape. We ate. Small talk moved around the table like a careful guest stepping over cracks. My mother asked about the weather, about the neighbors, about things that didn't require opinions. Claire talked about a brunch she'd gone to, a friend's engagement, a new place downtown that served cocktails with names that sounded like apologies. "And you," my father said, finally turning his attention to me, "what are you up to these days?" It wasn't curiosity, it never was, it was setup. "Working," I said, "same as usual." He chuckled, always so mysterious. He carved another piece of chicken, precise, controlled. "You know Claire just got another promotion." Claire waved a hand. "It's not a big deal." "It is," he said. "She works hard, people notice." I nodded, "That's good." He looked at me, then really looked the way you examine something you've already decided doesn't measure up. You could learn something from her. There it was, the line we always crossed. "I've learned plenty," I said, setting my fork down carefully. "Have you?" he asked, leaning back. "Because from where I'm sitting?" He paused, letting the room lean in with him. "You're not even half the woman your sister is." The words landed clean. No stumble, no hesitation. He'd said versions of them before, softer disguised. Tonight he didn't bother. My mother inhaled, sharp and small. "That's enough," she said, but not loud enough to matter. Claire shifted in her seat. "Dad?" What he said, shrugging. "It's the truth. She's always been different." Different. It was the word he used when he didn't want to say less. I felt the old instinct rise, the one that told me to laugh it off, to shrink, to make it easier for everyone else by making myself smaller. It had kept the peace for years. It had also kept me invisible. I set my napkin beside my plate. "Then she can start paying your rent." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush the words. I placed them the way you place something fragile and dangerous at the same time. For a moment no one moved. "Rent," my mother repeated, this time less careful. "What rent?" Claire's eyes moved from me to my father, then back again. She didn't speak. My father frowned, a small crease forming between his brows. "What are you talking about?" I looked at him steady. The house, the taxes, the repairs, the things that don't pay themselves. His laugh came quick, too quick. "I handle my own expenses." "Do you?" I asked. The room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make everything feel slightly off balance. My mother set her fork down. "What is she talking about?" No one answered. Because answering would mean choosing a version of the truth. My father leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice dropping into something closer to a warning. "You don't get to come in here and make things up." "I'm not making anything up," I said. Claire cleared her throat. "Maybe we should—" "Stay out of it," he snapped, not looking at her. That was new. She went quiet. I folded my hands in front of me, not out of nerves, but out of habit. Years of training had taught me where to put my body when things mattered. Stillness is a kind of control. You told everyone you don't need help, I said. You told Mom everything's covered. It is, he said. By who? He didn't answer. My mother looked between us, her face losing color in small, steady increments. I don't understand, she said. What is happening right now? I turned to her softer. I've been sending money, for a while. Her eyes widened. Sending money for what? For the house, I said. For everything. My father pushed his chair back slightly, the legs scraping against the tile. The sound echoed sharp and familiar. I didn't ask for that, he said. No, I agreed, you didn't. Then why? Because things needed to be paid, I said, and I had the means. My mother shook her head slowly like she was trying to wake herself from something. Why didn't you tell me? I met her eyes. You never asked. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things we hadn't said for years, things we'd chosen not to see because seeing them would require change. My father stood then, not all the way just enough to break the line of the table. This is ridiculous, he said. We're not doing this here. We're already doing it, I replied. Claire finally spoke, her voice careful. Maybe we should just finish dinner. No one reached for their plates. My father looked at me like he was trying to find the version of me he understood, the one who stayed quiet, who let him tell the story. That version wasn't sitting across from him anymore. You think this makes you better than us? He asked. I shook my head. No. Then what is this? He demanded. I held his gaze. This, I said, is me not being the version of me you're comfortable with. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once he didn't have a joke. For once the room didn't give him one. My mother stared at the tablecloth, at the faint pattern woven into it, as if it might offer an answer. Claire picked at her napkin, folding it into smaller and smaller shapes. And my father stood there, caught between the story he'd always told, and the one he hadn't known was being written without him. The chicken went cold. No one noticed. By morning, the house had returned to its habits. Coffee brewed at 6. The pipes clicked in the walls like they were remembering something. My mother moved through the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who believes that if she keeps everything else in order, maybe the people will follow. No one mentioned dinner. That was how we handled things growing up, not by resolving them, but by placing them carefully out of sight and stepping around them like furniture you don't want to admit doesn't belong. I sat at the table with a mug warming my hands, watching steam rise in thin, patient lines. Outside, the yard looked the same as it always had, grass-trimmed edges, neat, nothing out of place. Appearances had always mattered in our house, not truth, never truth. My father came in a few minutes later. He nodded at me once like I was someone he recognized but didn't particularly know. Morning, he said. Morning. He poured coffee, added sugar without measuring, and leaned against the counter. For a moment I thought he might say something about the night before. He didn't. You heading out today? He asked. Later. He nodded. Claire's coming by this afternoon. Of course she was. He didn't ask if I'd be there. He didn't ask if I wanted to stay. He didn't ask anything that might require him to acknowledge the shift that had already begun. That was his way. If he didn't name something, it didn't exist. I learned that early. I grew up in a house where comparison was a language. It didn't start loud. It never does. It starts small, almost reasonable. Why can't you be more like your sister? Look how she handles things. See, that's how it's done. At first, it sounds like guidance. Over time, it becomes measurement. Eventually, it becomes identity. Claire was easy to measure. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at the right volume, knew how to move through a room in a way that made people feel like they'd chosen her, not the other way around. Teachers liked her. Neighbors noticed her. My father admired her in a way that felt effortless, like breathing. I was useful. That's the word I settled on when I was old enough to understand the difference. I didn't light up rooms. I didn't soften edges. I didn't know how to make people comfortable when they didn't want to be. What I could do was show up, do the work, and not need applause. In our house, that wasn't the kind of value anyone talked about. I remember a Sunday afternoon when I was maybe 12. The kind of day where the air feels too still, like something is waiting. We had guests over, neighbors, people from church, the kind who sit on your couch and comment on things they don't have to live with. Claire had just finished telling a story about a school event, something small but told well. Everyone laughed at the right places. My father leaned back in his chair, pride easy in his posture. "That's my girl," he said. Then he looked at me. "And this one," he added, gesturing with his glass, "she'll get there eventually." Laughter, not cruel, not kind either, just enough to land. I smiled because that's what you do when you don't want to make things worse. Later in the kitchen, my mother pressed a dish towel into my hands and said, "He doesn't mean it like that." I nodded. "He just wants you to try harder," she added. I didn't ask harder at what. By high school, I had stopped trying to win a game I wasn't playing. Claire went to dances. I ran track. Not because I loved it, but because running gave me something clean effort and result out. No interpretation, no comparison, just time, distance, breath. I wasn't fast, I wasn't slow, I was consistent. No one cheered for consistent. At dinner, my father would ask Claire about her day first. He always did. By the time he got to me, if he got to me, the conversation had already moved on. "What about you?" he'd say like an afterthought. "Nothing much," I'd reply. It became easier that way. Invisibility isn't always a burden, sometimes it's a strategy. The military wasn't a rebellion. People like to frame it that way, like I joined to prove something, to escape, to become someone else. That's not what it was. It was structure. It was clarity. It was a place where the rules were written down and followed, where effort mattered more than charm, where you didn't have to be the version of yourself someone else preferred in order to be considered valuable. The first time an instructor corrected me, it was direct, precise, without edge. "Fix your approach." I did. Better. That was it. No comparison, no commentary on who I should be, just the work. It felt like relief. I didn't tell my father much about it. Partly because of security, mostly because I was tired of translating myself into something he could understand. When I came home on leave, I kept things simple. "I'm working." "Where?" "Different places." "What do you actually do?" "Same as before." He'd shake his head, half amused, half dismissive, always so vague. It was easier to let him think that than to watch him reduce something I cared about into a punchline he could control. Claire filled the space I left. She had a job that sounded good when you said it out loud. It came with titles, with offices, with things you could point to and understand without effort. My father liked that. He liked things that translated easily. "She's doing well," he'd say to anyone who would listen. And she was, in the ways that mattered to him. But there were things he didn't see, or chose not to. Claire's life looked stable from the outside, clean lines, good lighting, the kind of order that photographs well. But stability, I've learned, isn't always what it looks like. Bills don't care how things look. Neither do numbers. I found that out the first time I saw the overdue notice on the kitchen counter, tucked halfway under a stack of mail like it might hide itself if given the chance. My father wasn't careless, he was proud. Pride has a way of delaying things until they become problems. I didn't say anything then. I didn't say anything for a long time. Because saying something would mean stepping into a role I hadn't been given. Because saying something would mean acknowledging that the system we'd been living in, the one where Claire was the success and I was the afterthought, didn't actually function the way we pretended it did. So I did what I've always done. I handled it. Quietly. The first transfer was small. A test more than anything. It covered a bill that would have caused a conversation no one wanted to have. No one mentioned it. The second was larger. Then another. Repairs, taxes, things that don't wait for pride to catch up. I didn't attach my name to any of it. I routed it through accounts that made it look like the money had always been there. Because I wasn't trying to be seen. I was trying to keep things from breaking. And it worked. For a while. The house stayed intact, the lights stayed on. The version of reality my father preferred remained undisturbed. Claire continued to be the daughter he pointed to. I continued to be the one he didn't quite understand. The difference was now I understood something he didn't. Value doesn't always look the way people expect it to. Back at the table that morning, he finished his coffee and set the mug down with a soft, controlled sound. "You shouldn't have said that last night," he said, not looking at me. "Which part?" He frowned. "You know which part?" I nodded. "I know." He waited like he expected something else, an apology maybe, a step back into the version of me he was comfortable with. I didn't move. "You embarrassed me," he said finally. I met his eyes. I was embarrassed, I replied, for years. That landed. He looked away first. The clock on the wall ticked, steady, indifferent. Outside, a car passed. Inside, something had shifted. Not loudly, not completely, but enough that the next conversation wouldn't sound the same. Claire arrived at exactly 2:17 p.m., which was late enough to be forgiven and early enough to be noticed. She parked in the driveway like she always did, slightly angled like she didn't intend to stay long but never really left when she said she would. The car door shut with a soft, expensive sound. She stepped out wearing something that looked effortless but wasn't. It never was. My father was already at the window. "There she is," he said, not to me but into the room as if the house itself needed to be informed. I stayed where I was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of water untouched in front of me. Claire walked in with that same practiced ease she carried everywhere, shoulders relaxed, smile, ready eyes, scanning just enough to take the temperature of the room. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. My father moved toward her before she'd even set her bag down. "Traffic okay?" he asked. "Not bad," she said, "just the usual." He nodded, satisfied, like she'd passed a test no one had announced. My mother came in from the living room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You want coffee?" she asked. "Sure," Claire said, smiling at her in that soft, appreciative way that made people feel useful. It was a small thing. It always had been. But small things repeated often enough become patterns. And patterns become stories people believe. We sat at the table again, but it felt different now. Not quieter exactly, just more aware. Claire crossed one leg over the other, her posture easy. So she said, glancing between us, "What did I miss last night?" No one answered right away. My father cleared his throat. "Nothing important." I almost smiled. Claire tilted her head, slightly studying him. "Didn't sound like nothing when I left." "It's handled," he said. "Handled," she repeated like she was tasting the word. I watched her, not with suspicion, but with the kind of attention you give something you finally decided to understand instead of accept. Claire wasn't careless. She was strategic. There's a difference. People like Claire don't stumble into success. They build it piece by piece using materials that aren't always visible. Charm is one of them. Timing is another. Knowing when to speak and, more importantly, when not to, is the one most people miss. Claire had all of that. What she didn't have, at least not in the way my father believed, was stability. Not the kind that holds when no one's looking. "I heard about your promotion," I said, breaking the silence. Claire glanced at me, surprised, then smiled. "Yeah, it's good." "What changed?" I asked. "More responsibility," she said, "more visibility." My father nodded approvingly. "That's how it works. You prove yourself, people notice." Claire didn't correct him. She rarely did. The truth about Claire's job was simple. It sounded better than it paid. Titles carry weight in conversation. They open doors. They make people lean in. But they don't always translate into numbers that hold up under pressure. I knew that because I'd seen the statements. Not because I'd gone looking for them, but because they had a way of appearing like the overdue notice months ago, tucked just out of sight, but not far enough. "Everything going okay?" my mother asked, setting a mug in front of Claire. "Yeah," Claire said quickly. "Busy, but good." My mother nodded, relieved by the answer. Relief, I've learned, doesn't require accuracy, just reassurance. Claire stirred her coffee, watching the surface settle. So she said again, "Are we really not going to talk about last night?" My father's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to talk about." "There's always something to talk about," she said lightly. "Not a challenge, not exactly. But close enough." I leaned back slightly, studying them both. This was the part people miss, the space between what's said and what's understood. Claire knew more than she let on. She had to. You don't move through life the way she did without noticing patterns. And the pattern lately had been simple. Things were being paid. Without explanation. "Did something happen with the house?" she asked finally. My mother looked up. "What do you mean?" Claire shrugged, casual. "I don't know. Repairs maybe. Dad mentioned something a few weeks ago." He hadn't. But it sounded like something he would say. My father shifted in his seat. "It's taken care of." "By who?" Claire asked. There it was again. That question. Simple, direct, uncomfortable. My father didn't answer right away. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He looked at the table like it might offer him something solid to stand on. "I've got it handled," he said finally. Claire nodded slowly like she accepted that answer but didn't fully believe it. She took a sip of coffee, then set the mug down carefully. "You've been saying that a lot lately," she said. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," she said quickly, "just noticing." She glanced at me then just for a second. It wasn't a look of accusation. It was recognition. Claire wasn't blind. She knew her own numbers. She knew what she made, what she spent, what she could and couldn't cover. And she knew whether she admitted it out loud or not that there were gaps. Gaps someone had been quietly filling. "I've helped when I can," she added almost as an afterthought. My father nodded immediately. "I know you have." I watched her. She didn't correct him. Again. There it was. Not a lie. Not exactly. But not the truth either. And that's where most families live, not in lies, but in versions of truth that are easier to hold. I stood up then, not abruptly, just enough to shift the room again. "I'm going out for a bit," I said. My mother looked up. "You'll be back for dinner." "Maybe." My father didn't say anything. Claire did. "Wait," she said, "can we talk?" I paused. Not because I had to. Because I chose to. About what I asked. She hesitated just for a second. Then, about last night. We stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected, the kind of cool that doesn't last, but still manages to change how things feel. Claire leaned against her car, arms crossed loosely. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." "So why did you—" I considered the question. Because the easy answer would have been anger. The real answer was simpler. "Because I was tired," I said. "Tired of what?" "Being the version of me he prefers," I replied. She looked at me, really looked this time without the usual distance. "He's just like that," she said. "I know." "You could ignore it," she added. "I did," I said, "for a long time." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know," she said then. "About what?" "The money." I believed her. That was the part people wouldn't expect. Claire wasn't the architect of the system. She was just its most visible beneficiary. "I wasn't trying to make you look bad," I said. "I know," she replied. "Were you trying to make him look bad?" she asked. I shook my head. "Number." "Then what?" I met her eyes. "Just accurate." She let that sit. The wind moved through the trees behind us, soft, steady. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have asked," I replied. She smiled faint, almost tired. "That's not how this family works," she said. No, I agreed, it's not. We stood there for a moment longer, not arguing, not agreeing, just existing in a space that felt new because it hadn't been defined yet. Finally, she pushed off the car. "Be careful," she said. "With what?" "With how this goes," she replied. "He doesn't like losing control." I almost laughed. "He never had it," I said. She didn't respond. Because we both knew that wasn't entirely true. He'd had it for years. We'd just stopped noticing. As I walked away, I felt something settle. Not resolution, not yet, but clarity. The story I'd been living in was changing. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough that the next part wouldn't follow the same script. I didn't go far. Just down the road past the mailbox that leaned slightly to the left, past the fence my father had promised to fix 3 summers ago, and never did. The kind of walk that gives your body something to do while your mind catches up to what's already been decided. The sky had that late afternoon color, soft, almost forgiving. The kind of light that makes everything look like it belongs where it is. It's misleading. Most things only look settled from a distance. When I came back, the house was quieter. Claire's car was still in the driveway, but the front door was closed. I stepped inside without announcing myself. The air felt different, not tense, not loud, just aware. Voices came from the living room. My mother first. "I don't understand why you didn't tell me." My father's reply came slower. There was nothing to tell. "That's not true," she said. "You said everything was covered." "It is." "By who?" Silence. The kind that doesn't hide anything, the kind that reveals it. I stepped into the doorway. They didn't notice me at first. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward, elbows on her knees. My mother stood near the coffee table, hands wrapped around each other like she was holding something fragile that might break if she let go. My father stood by the window looking out, but not seeing anything. I asked you, my mother said again, quieter this time, more than once. And I answered, he replied. You avoided, she corrected. He turned then sharp defensive. I handled it. How, she asked. Another pause. Not long. Just long enough. That's what I thought I said. They all turned. Claire's eyes flicked to me, then back to him. My mother looked relieved and terrified at the same time. My father didn't look surprised. He looked cornered. We're talking, he said. So am I replied. I stepped into the room, slow, deliberate, not to take control, just to stand in it. My mother shook her head slightly. Please, she said, just explain it. I nodded once. Okay. I didn't rush it. Truth doesn't need speed, it needs space. The mortgage is paid, I said, but the taxes aren't always on time. My father exhaled through his nose like he was already tired of hearing it. The roof needed repairs last year, I continued. So did the plumbing and the furnace. My mother's eyes widened. What furnace? The one that stopped working in January, I said. You remember? She nodded slowly. You said it was just a part. It was, I said, an expensive one. She turned to him. Why didn't you tell me? I fixed it, he said. No, I replied. I did. That landed. Not loudly, but completely. My mother sat down. Claire didn't move. My father's jaw tightened, the muscle shifting under the skin like something trying to break through. I didn't ask you to do that, he said. I know, I replied. Then why? Because it needed to be done. That's not your responsibility. No, I agreed, but it became mine when it wasn't being handled. My mother looked between us, her expression searching for something stable. How long, she asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know. Because saying it out loud would change everything in a way that couldn't be undone. A few years, I said. Her breath caught. A few years? I nodded. Claire leaned back slowly, her posture changing, something in it, loosening like a piece of a puzzle she hadn't realized was missing had just clicked into place. You've been covering everything, she asked. Not everything, I said, just enough. She let out a small laugh, not amused, just surprised. And he just let that happen. My father turned to her, anger rising now easier than whatever else he might have felt. I didn't let anything happen, he said. I handled my own house. Claire raised an eyebrow. Did you? That was the moment. Not the reveal. The shift. The room had already moved. Now it was settling into a new arrangement. My father looked at me again, searching for something, weakness maybe, or a way to reframe what had just been said into something he could manage. You're making this sound like I can't take care of my own family, he said. I met his gaze. I'm making it sound like what happened, I replied. That's not the same thing. It is, I said. He took a step forward. You don't get to come in here and rewrite everything he said. I'm not rewriting, I answered. I'm clarifying. For who, he demanded. For anyone who's been listening to the wrong version? Silence again. But different now. Less heavy. More precise. My mother pressed her hands to her face, then lowered them slowly. All this time, she said, you let me think we were fine. We are fine, he insisted. Because of her, Claire said. He didn't respond. Claire stood up. That's why you didn't want to talk about it, she said, more to herself than anyone else. My father shook his head. This isn't what it looks like. Then what is it, she asked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I watched him. Not with anger. Not even with satisfaction. Just observation. For years, he'd controlled the narrative not through lies, but through confidence, the kind that makes people stop questioning. Now that confidence had a crack in it. Not big, but enough. I wasn't trying to expose you, I said. He looked at me sharply. Then what were you doing? I considered that. Because the answer mattered. Not for him. For me. I was correcting something I said finally. What he asked. The idea that I don't contribute, I replied. He scoffed. This isn't about contribution. No, I said. It's about perception. My mother nodded slowly, like she was beginning to understand something she hadn't had the words for before. You've always talked about her like she trailed off, glancing at Claire. Like she's the one holding everything together, Claire finished. My father didn't deny it. I never said that, he muttered. You didn't have to, I said. The room held that. All the things that had been implied, repeated, reinforced over years, without ever being directly stated. That's how most beliefs form. Not through declaration. Through repetition. Claire crossed her arms, looking at him now with something new, not admiration, not defense. Assessment. That's not fair, she said. To who he shot back. To her, Claire replied, nodding toward me. That surprised me. Not because she said it. Because she said it out loud. He looked between us, something unsettled moving behind his eyes. You're both overreacting, he said. No, I replied. We're just not ignoring it anymore. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that doesn't ask for resolution. Just recognition. Finally, my father looked away. Not in defeat. Not exactly. Just withdrawal. He moved back toward the window, the same spot he'd stood in before. Outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. I didn't need credit, I said, quieter now. I just needed you to stop pretending I didn't matter. He didn't turn around. But I saw it. The slight shift in his shoulders. The smallest acknowledgement. It wasn't enough. But it was something. And sometimes something is where change starts. He didn't come to me that night. He stayed in the living room longer than usual, the television on, but unwatched, the volume low enough to pretend it wasn't there. My mother moved through the kitchen in careful silence. Claire left just before sunset, her goodbye quieter than her arrival, her hug brief, her eyes lingering a second longer than necessary. I went to the back porch. It was always cooler there. The boards creaked in the same places they had for years, familiar in a way that didn't ask anything from you. I sat on the top step, elbows on my knees, hands loosely clasped. The yard stretched out in front of me, neat and contained. My father liked things that could be defined by edges. People were harder. The screen door opened behind me. I didn't turn. You always did this, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the way it always had, direct, certain, used to being heard. Did what I asked. Walk away, he replied. I nodded slightly. Sometimes that's the best option. For who, he asked. For everyone, I said. He stepped out onto the porch. The door clicked shut behind him, soft but final. He stood there for a moment like he wasn't sure where to put himself in a space that didn't come with instructions. Then he sat down on the step beside me. Not too close. Not far either. You made me look like I don't know what I'm doing, he said. There it was. Not concern. Not curiosity. Image. I didn't make you look like anything, I replied. I said what was true. Not everything that's true needs to be said, he shot back. I let that sit. Because he wasn't wrong. He just wasn't complete. You're right, I said after a moment, but some things need to stop being ignored. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to generate friction where there wasn't any. You could have talked to me, he said. I have, I replied. When he asked, turning toward me, I met his eyes. Every time you compared me to Claire, I said. Every time you dismissed what I do. Every time you made me smaller so she could look bigger. He frowned. That's not what I was doing. That's what happened, I said. He looked away, jaw tight. I was trying to motivate you, he muttered. I almost smiled. That's what you call it, I asked. What would you call it, he challenged. I thought about that. Not quickly. Carefully. I'd call it choosing one version of your daughter, I said, and ignoring the other. He shook his head. That's not fair. No, I agreed, it's not. Silence settled between us again, but this time it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like space. The kind that lets something real exist, even if it's uncomfortable. You've always been difficult, he said after a while. I nodded. I know. You don't make things easy, he added. I'm not supposed to, I replied. I'm supposed to be honest. He huffed out a breath somewhere between frustration and something he didn't have a word for. That's not how the world works, he said. It is where I work, I answered. That caught him. He glanced at me just briefly. You think you're better than this place, he asked. No, I said. I just don't let it define me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, now mirroring my posture without realizing it. So what happens now, he asked. The question wasn't about logistics. It was about control. About whether he still had it. We decide how this works, I said. We, he repeated. Yes. He scoffed. Since when is this a negotiation? Since I stopped being a kid, I replied, "That landed. Not with force. With weight." "You're still my daughter," he said. "I know," I answered, "and you're still my father." "Then act like it," he said. I turned to him fully now. "I am," I said. "I'm just not acting like the version you're used to." He stared at me, trying to reconcile something that didn't fit into the framework he'd built over years. "What do you want?" he asked finally. There it was. The question that mattered. I didn't rush the answer. Because this wasn't about reacting. It was about defining. "I want you to stop," I said. "Stop what?" he asked. "Stop turning me into a comparison," I replied. "Stop using me to highlight someone else. Stop pretending I don't contribute just because I don't do it your way." He frowned. "I never said you don't contribute." "You didn't have to," I said. "You made it clear." He opened his mouth, then paused. For the first time, he seemed to consider that possibility. "Not fully, but enough." "And if I don't?" he asked. The question wasn't a threat. It was a test. I held his gaze. "Then I won't be here as much," I said. He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I won't put myself in situations where I'm disrespected," I replied, "even if it's family." That hit harder than anything else. Not because it was loud. Because it was final. "You'd really do that?" he asked. "Yes," I said. No hesitation. No apology. Just truth. He leaned back, processing. "You've changed," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "You're just seeing me clearly now." Another silence. But this one felt different. Less defensive. More uncertain. "I didn't know," he said after a while. "About what?" "About the money, about everything." I believed that. Not because he couldn't have known. Because he hadn't been looking. "You didn't ask," I said. He nodded slowly. "That seems to be a pattern," he admitted. I let that settle. Because acknowledgement, even small, matters. "So what do I do?" he asked. It wasn't a demand. It was something else. I considered him. Really looked. Not as the man who'd shaped my childhood, but as the one sitting next to me now. "You listen," I said. He nodded. And he prompted. "You stop making jokes at my expense," I continued. "You stop comparing. And when you don't understand something about me." "I ask," he finished. "Yes," I said. He let out a breath, long and slow. "That's going to take some getting used to," he admitted. "I know," I said. We sat there for a while after that. No resolution. No dramatic shift. Just two people adjusting to a new version of something that had been the same for too long. Before he stood up, he said one more thing. "You didn't have to pay for all that." "I know," I replied. "Then why did you—" I looked out at the yard. At the fence. At the house. "Because things matter," I said. He nodded. Not fully understanding. But not dismissing it either. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough to start with. Change doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly in the spaces where old habits used to live and waits to see if anyone notices. The next morning, the house sounded different. Not quieter, just less certain. My father still woke early. Coffee still brewed at 6. The radio still played low in the background, the same station he'd listened to for years. But something in the rhythm had shifted, like a song played just slightly off-tempo. He didn't say much at breakfast. That wasn't new. What was new was what he didn't say. My mother set a plate in front of him. "Eggs?" she asked. He nodded, "Thanks." He didn't look at me right away. When he did, it wasn't with the usual quick assessment, the silent comparison. It was neutral. "Morning," he said. "Morning." That was it. No commentary, no setup. Just a word. It's a small thing. But small things repeated often enough become something else. Claire didn't come by that day. Or the next. When she finally called, it was in the afternoon, her voice measured, controlled in a way that told me she'd been thinking more than she was comfortable with. "How is he?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. She let out a small breath. "That's new." "Yes." "Is that good?" she asked. "I think so." Another pause. "I didn't realize," she said. "About what?" "How much he built everything around me," she replied. I leaned against the counter, looking out the window. "He didn't build it around you," I said. "He built it around what he understood." And that was me, she said. Yes. She didn't argue. I never asked him to do that, she added. I know. But I didn't stop it either, she said. That was closer to the truth. Most people don't, I said. Not when it benefits them. She was quiet for a moment. That sounds like something you've thought about for a while, she said. It is. We didn't stay on the phone long. Not because there was nothing to say. Because we were still figuring out how to say it. Back at the house, things moved slowly. Carefully. My father fixed the loose hinge on the cabinet door that had been off for months. He didn't mention it, he just did it. He checked the mailbox earlier than usual, sorting through the envelopes with more attention than before. Bills, I noticed, didn't sit untouched anymore. At dinner, he didn't start conversations. But when my mother spoke, he listened. Not distracted. Not waiting for his turn. Just listening. On the third day, he tried something new. How's work, he asked me. It wasn't the question. It was the way he asked it. No edge, no expectation. Just a question. Busy, I said. What kind of busy, he followed. I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because I was deciding how much to give. Long hours, I said, a lot of responsibility. He nodded. Sounds like it matters, he said. It does. He didn't ask for details. That mattered more. We sat in that space for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Just unfamiliar. Later that evening, he stepped out onto the porch while I was already there. He didn't sit immediately. He stood looking out at the yard hands in his pockets. I've been thinking, he said. That's usually dangerous, I replied. He gave a small smile. Not the kind he used at the dinner table. Something quieter. Yeah, he said, I guess it is. He sat down beside me. Same distance as before. Measured. I didn't realize how often he stopped searching. Compared, I offered. He nodded. Yeah. I waited. Because this part matters. Not interrupting. Not filling the silence. Letting people arrive at their own conclusions. I thought I was helping, he said. I know, I replied. But I wasn't, he added. No, I said. He nodded slowly, absorbing that without argument. That's a hard thing to admit, he said. It is, I agreed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. I've been mean, he said. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just stated. I looked at him. You've been afraid, I said. He frowned slightly. Afraid of what? Of not knowing how to connect without control, I replied. He let out a breath. That sounds about right, he admitted. We sat there for a while. The air had cooled again, the kind that settles into your skin without asking. I don't know how to fix it, he said after a while. You don't fix it, I said. Then what do I do? You change how you act, I replied, consistently. He nodded. That sounds like work, he said. It is. He was quiet again. Then, I talked to Claire, he said. I glanced at him. About what? About how I've been treating both of you, he replied. And, he shrugged slightly. She said I made it easy for her. That's honest, I said. Yeah, he agreed. Another pause. But not empty. I don't want to be that guy, he said. What guy, I asked. The one who only sees what's easy to see, he replied. I nodded. That's a good place to start, I said. The next few days continued like that. No big conversations. No dramatic apologies. Just adjustments. At the grocery store, he introduced me to someone from his old job. This is my daughter, he said. He stopped there. No comparison. No qualification. Just a statement. The man nodded. Nice to meet you. You too, I said. My father didn't add anything else. That was new. At dinner one night, Claire came back. She sat down, looked between us, and said, "This feels different." "It is," my father said. She nodded. No one explained. No one needed to. Halfway through the meal, he started to say something, one of his old patterns. I could hear it in the first few words. "Claire's always been..." He stopped. Mid-sentence. He cleared his throat. "Claire's doing well," he corrected. And left it there. I noticed. So did Claire. She didn't smile. But something in her shoulders relaxed. That's what change sounds like. Not perfection. Correction. Later that night, as I was getting ready to leave, my father stood by the door. "You heading back tomorrow?" he asked. Yes. He nodded. Drive safe, he said. Then after a second, let me know when you get there. It wasn't a big moment. No declarations. No grand gestures. Just care. Unpracticed. Real. I nodded. I will. As I stepped outside the porch, light flicked on behind me. Not because it had to. Because he turned it on. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something unfinished. By late summer, the heat had softened into something more forgiving. The kind of weather that lets you stay outside a little longer than you planned. The kind that makes people linger in conversations instead of rushing through them. The town looked the same, but it moved differently, less sharp, less performative. At the diner, no one asked questions anymore. They just nodded. At church, people stopped leaning in with curiosity. They stood beside me instead, hand-steady voices even. They used my name without attaching anything to it. Respect, I've learned, doesn't arrive loudly. It settles. My father had changed. Not completely. People don't. But enough. He spoke less. When he did, he chose his words the way a man chooses where to step on uneven ground, carefully aware that one wrong move could take him back to where he started. He didn't joke about me anymore. He didn't compare. And when he didn't know what to say, he didn't fill the space with something easy. He let it be quiet. One evening he came by with a bag of groceries. Not a lot, just a few things. Bread, coffee, tomatoes that were a little too soft but still good if you used them quickly. They bruise easy, he said, setting them on the counter. I'll use them tonight, I replied. He nodded, looking around like he was taking inventory of something he hadn't paid attention to before. You keep things simple, he said. It works, I answered. He didn't argue. We ate standing up. No table. No formality. Just food conversation moving in and out without pressure. At one point, he glanced at the door. You fixed the hinge, I said. He nodded. It was bothering me. It's been bothering me for months. I know, he said. That was it. Not an apology. An acknowledgement. Sometimes that's enough. A week later, there was another family gathering. Smaller this time. Backyard folding chairs, a grill that smoked more than it cooked. The kind of setting where people feel comfortable enough to slip back into old habits. I noticed it immediately, the way conversations leaned toward familiar patterns, the way expectations hovered just beneath the surface. Claire stood near the grill talking to someone from the neighborhood. She looked the same as always, composed, present, easy to like. But there was something different in how she held herself. Less central. More aware. I stayed near the edge of the yard. Not hiding. Just not stepping forward. I didn't need to. A man I didn't recognize approached my father. Your daughter's here, he asked. My father nodded, both of them. The man glanced around. Which one? As he stopped himself like he wasn't sure how to finish the question. What my father asked. The one you were telling me about, he said. There it was. The setup. The old version of the story waiting to be told again. I watched my father. Not closely. Just enough. He looked at Claire first. Then at me. Then back at the man. For a moment I saw it, the instinct. The familiar path. The easy version. Then he did something different. She flies, he said, nodding toward me. No explanation. No embellishment. No comparison. The man raised his eyebrows slightly. That's so. I nodded. Yes, sir. Well, he said, that's something. My father didn't add anything. He didn't turn it into a story. He didn't make it about himself. He let it stand. Claire walked over, then handing him a plate. Food's ready, she said. He took it, thanks. She glanced at me just for a second. Not competitive. Not defensive. Just neutral. That was new too. Later, as the sun started to dip and the air cooled just enough to notice, my father sat down beside me on one of the folding chairs. You handled that well, he said. What I asked. Not saying too much, he replied. I smiled slightly. I learned from experience. He nodded. Me too, he said. We sat there for a while watching people move around the yard. Kids running. Adults talking. The kind of scene that looks simple but never really is. I used to think being right was the most important thing he said. And now I asked. He looked out at the fence, the one he'd finally fixed. Now I think being fair matters more, he said. I nodded. That's a better standard, I replied. He shifted in his seat, then looked at me. I'm glad you said something he admitted. About the money. About everything he said. I considered that. Because the truth is saying something hadn't felt like victory. It had felt like necessity. I didn't do it to prove anything, I said. I know, he replied. Then why, he asked. I looked out at the yard. At the people. At the life that had continued quietly adjusting itself. Because I didn't want to disappear in my own story, I said. He nodded slowly. That makes sense, he said. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. That's the thing about revenge. People think it's loud, dramatic, final. It's not. Real revenge is quieter than that. It's not about making someone else smaller. It's about refusing to be reduced. It's drawing a line and standing on your side of it even when it would be easier to step back. It's living in a way that doesn't require permission. My father stood up after a while. Need anything, he asked. No, I said, I'm good. He nodded. Then he hesitated. Just for a second. I'm glad you're you, he said. Not polished. Not perfect. But real. I nodded. Me too, I replied. That night I packed my bag. Boots by the door. Jacket on the hook. The same routine I'd followed for years. The difference was this time I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I was taking it with me. As I stepped outside the porch, light came on again. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. If you've ever been in a place where you felt unseen or measured against someone else's version of who you should be, then you know how quiet that kind of weight can be, and how powerful it is when you finally set it down. If this story felt familiar to you, if it reminded you of something you've lived through or are still working through, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I'd like to know how far stories like this travel. We share stories like this every day, real ones, honest ones, the kind that stay with you a little longer than you expect. If you want to hear more, subscribe and stay with us. Let's keep choosing respect. Together.